Now, I can't guarantee that your stock is going to go up 400% in the next couple of years, but I will say it's going to unleash a lot of human potential that probably isn't being exercised right now. So this takes us to the final part of our program where we're actually going to talk about the how-to. Anybody, what movie was this from? Monty Python and the Search for the 12 Rules of Respect. Close, right? So what I want to do in our remaining time is very quickly introduce to you, and there's a list. And by the way, we actually have, Richard, did we hand out the small cards yet? So we're going to have a portable version of these that are kind of wallet-sized also. You have them written in your handout, but we're going to give you a portable version. All I'd like you to do as I go through these is I'd like you to simply, for you, everybody, we kind of all know ourselves a little bit, and some of us need a little work in this area, and some of us need a little work in a different area. If based on your feedback from other people in your life, maybe your significant other or an ex-significant other or your coworkers, try to mark down the 2 or 3 that for you believe to be low-hanging fruit. The first of these is simply be aware of your nonverbal and extraverbal cues. Without belaboring this point, I will simply say that respect has to be a whole body experience for other people. You see, our species has only had language for about 30,000 years. Out of the several hundred thousands of years we've been evolving. We've always been communicating. We just didn't have language. So how did we communicate prior to language? Gestures and grunts and grunts. And guess what? We still do that. Maybe a little bit more refined right now, but we still do that. And if my words say one thing, but my nonverbals and extraverbals say something else, then we're going to have a little bit of an issue. So if I say, and your name is Ben. So I say, Ben, hey, thanks a lot for sticking around to get that project last night finished. It really helped me out. Thanks. How's that feel? Great. Now, how about I said, hey, Ben, thanks a lot for sticking around last night. Getting that project done really helped me out a lot. Now, how are you feeling? Yeah, devalued a little bit, right? Whenever my words say one thing and my nonverbals and extraverbals say something else, we automatically default to the nonverbals and extraverbals because history, our genome has told us that my ability, I'll be much more likely to ascertain your true frame of mind by watching your body, not just your words. So when you're giving a compliment, when you're talking to people, make sure your body language is along for the ride also. Number 2, show genuine curiosity for the perspectives of other people. We're going to experiment with this in just a minute here. But I want to share with you what for me was a remarkable experience. 2 years ago, I was presenting something similar, a very similar curriculum to a group of state employees from the state of California. It was the Bureau of the Board of Equalization, the California, which is basically their sales tax collection agency. 4,500 employees who do nothing but collect sales tax for the state of California. And I met this wonderful young woman, and she was a bona fide little person. She stood all about 30 inches tall. And I noticed her because prior to the presentation that I was making, she was walking in ahead of me from the parking lot, and for every step I took, I noticed that she had to take 2 or 3 steps to keep pace with everybody else. But I also noticed when I got inside, because she sat in the second row, that she had the most amazing smile. And, when a speaker's getting ready to present, she was making eye contact with me and smiling, and she was giving me all kind of positive feedback without even really saying anything. And so because there was a presenter, a group of people who spoke before I did, at the intermission, I decided to go over and I introduced myself. And I said, hi. I said, I noticed you walking in. I'm Paul Mashenko. And she said, oh, so nice to meet you. She goes, I'm Margarita Farrell. And I said, Margarita, I noticed you walking in today. I said, you just have this positive vibe about you. I said, given your short stature, I said, you seem like there's probably not a lot you can't do. And she said, well, you're right. You know what? I can't do much. She goes, I type 120 words a minute. And I said, is there anything you can't do? And she goes, I can't hit the upper buttons in the elevator sometimes. Sometimes I need to get my coworkers to help with that. I said, really? I said, wow. And I don't know why. We were kind of having a moment. And I said, Margarita, what are you most proud of? Of all the things that you've done, what are you most proud of? And she kind of looked down and she was like, well, this is probably my entertainment career. It's like, Or what? She said, my entertainment career. I said, well, what do you mean? She says, well, most people don't know this. She goes, I was actually one of the actresses that played E.T. in the movie. I was like, what? I said, wait, let me get my camera out. Somebody get us a picture of us. I'm the guy that he paid thousands of dollars to come in and speak. And I'm like, get my picture with Margarita over here. Here's what she told me. She goes, I said, Margarita, I mean, do people come up to you all the time? She goes, believe it or not, she goes, there's probably only a handful of people who even know that about me here. She'd been working there for 12 years. And she said there were probably no more than a dozen people who knew that she was one of the actresses that was in E.T., that played E.T. Now, I can't guarantee you that you're going to meet hidden movie stars amongst your ranks. But what I will tell you is this. By having conversations that go outside the bounds of just regular peer-to-peer project communications is the potential to discover things about each other that will significantly increase the value. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm sorry. Sure. Yes.
You called out her difference being a small person versus just acknowledging her as a person with a vibrant personality who was engaging.
Right.
Why the difference?
Well, so, and I gave a very condensed version of that presentation. Actually, the very first thing I commented on to her when we met was her amazing personality and her beautiful smile and everything. And she actually had her husband, who was also a little person right next to her. Somehow we got onto that topic and we started talking about the differences. So I gave a very abbreviated version of that interaction. But here's what we're going to do. Right? Please, go ahead.
Sorry, so how do we deal, so I generally want to connect with someone, but for some people that can actually be disrespectful. It's like, why do you want to know more about this?
Right.
There's a line here, you are trying to cross it.
Right.
How do we deal with that?
So here's what we're going to actually experiment with that right now. I'm going to give you 5 questions that are different than the questions we typically engage each other on. But each of these questions, they can be applied to either just my experience as a P&G employee or my entire life. And so we do have to be respectful of the boundaries that people set sometimes. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to do a pairs exercise where you're going to actually interview somebody else that's seated in here right now. And the questions that I want you to orient around are these 5. You're only going to probably have time to do 1 or 2 of them, but here's the questions. What accomplishments are you most proud of? And this can be anything that you choose to share, either about your experience here as a P&G employee or life in general. Number 2, what brings you the most joy or satisfaction? To whom or what are you most grateful, and for what? What is one of your favorite memories? I can talk about my favorite memories of being a P&G employee pretty safely, right? Or what's an important long-term goal that you want to accomplish? So what we're going to do is we're going to do an abbreviated version of this. I just want you to spend about 2 minutes getting to know one of the people next to you. And after 2 minutes, I'm going to have you switch, and your job when you're the interviewer is to learn as absolutely much about the other person as you can in 2 minutes. When they say something and you connect with it, share the similarity or ask them a clarifying question. But your job is to get to know a little bit about them in a way that probably wouldn't happen naturally in a work environment. So pick the person you're going to work with, first of all. Okay, everybody got it first? And if we have groups of 3, you can do this I'll leave enough time that you can do this with 3 people if you need to. So, whoever's going to go first, and it may be 2 of you interviewing another, go for it, and then I'll give you the 2-minute change point.
We just got back from your mind.
Okay, finish up. I know we could spend a lot more time doing this, but go ahead and switch to the next person if you wouldn't mind. Okay, take a few more seconds and kind of finish up the question that you're on. All right. How many of you could have gone on easily another 10 minutes with these questions and conversations? As a process observer, let me tell you what I saw and what do you think I saw more than anything as I was looking around the room? Engagement and what else on people's faces? Everybody was smiling. What do you think I heard? Talking and laughter. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for the workplace? It's fantastic. It couldn't be better. How many of you, just in this literally 5 minutes that we took, how many of you learned something unique about the person you were talking with? How many of you found a point of connection with the person that you were talking with, right? What's so different about these questions than the ones that we typically engage each other in on a day-to-day basis? They're about the person. They have what we call emotional valence. For me to even give you, first of all, I have to know that you're really curious, that you're not just trying to, you're not just passing time. And even then, it's kind of like stepping on new ice on a pond or a river. You want to make sure it's safe right before you volunteer anything too vulnerable. But then as we gradually see that the other person is going to hold with care and tenderness and respect pieces of me that are so important to me, and then they actually want to know more, all of a sudden there's a bridge that forms between us. A bridge of what? Trust, connection and trust. And then we become chemically linked. Oxytocin starts to come out in both of our bodies. I start to see you as a friend and an ally and vice versa. How likely is it that we're going to subsequently treat each other with disrespect once we have this kind of connection? We only spent 5 minutes doing this. What if you spent 10 minutes, 15 minutes, once a week doing this with the person that you work with? You go out and have coffee or lunch with them. But you intentionally talk about things about the person, not just about work and the problem. We treat each other as people first, co-workers second. All of a sudden, we start bonding in a way that couldn't happen before because we become basically guardians of each other's, the essence of each of us, what we hold sacred to us. And we become smarter about each other in the process. It's kind of like updating our software. I like the analogy. I mean, how many of you have Windows-based computers and like twice a month our software is automatically updating itself, right? How often do we update our software about the people we work with? How many of you know people who are walking around still with DOS and they don't want any updates? Just keep your update. I know what I know already. I don't need any more. All right, so rule number 3. Very simply, treat other people like they're smart. How many of you are smart? We're all pretty smart. How many of you like to be treated like you're smart? We all do. And here's the funny thing. What research says is that my actual intelligence around you actually depends on how smart I think you think I am. And this is a real challenge in minority populations because the expectation is that some groups don't feel as though the rest of the people around them think they're smart, and they actually score accordingly. When I feel smarter around you, it's possible that my IQ can actually go up by up to 15 points. Simply because I am being treated by you as though you expect me to be smart. So let's treat each other like we're smart. Rule number 4. Become a better listener by shaking your butt. Notice it's 1 T, not 2. How many of you how many of you are practitioners of the but? Well, I'm hearing what you're saying there, but. And when we say but, what does that really communicate to the other person? What I just said is crap. Here's what I really mean, right? And we try to coach it. What if I say however instead? Well, I hear what you're saying. However, you know what however is? It's but with a bow tie. It sounds a little fancier, but it's saying the same thing for the most part anyways, isn't it? So what do we say instead? Even though my ideas may be different than yours, how about if I said, hey, I say, Richard, I hear what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense. What if at the same time we also considered this? Now, I just did something that he and you and I all value. What did I do? I validated what his idea was first, and I didn't knock it off the table to put mine up there. I simply scooted it over a little bit so I could also put some additional information up there. These small changes in how we talk with one another can have a huge impact. So don't be a butthead. Number 5, look for opportunities to connect and support with others. There are some people who just go into a meeting looking for ways to challenge other people. Let's find the points of connection first. And especially if we know that we're going to have disagreement, let's identify the things that we agree on first so that we know what we have in common. And we can use those as a position of strength to then discuss, hopefully productively, the differences. Rule number 6, explain why you disagree when you do. Don't go silent. Give people the, I'm not going to talk about this anymore. That doesn't help anybody, right? So if I have a difference of opinion, I need to be mature enough to be willing to share that with you so that we can always be on an equal knowledge footing with each other. Number 7 is one of my favorites. Stretch your personal comfort zones. This is a huge one. We are such creatures of habit. A couple years ago, this is actually in 1997. You can see a much younger Paul Mashenko in the middle there. I was finishing my MBA at Baldwin Wallace College up in Cleveland, and I was given the option of taking either a 10-week course in international studies or going to Asia for 10 days. Which would you take? I'd said, Alex, I'll take Asia for 10 days, please. And so part of that experience was actually staying with a host family, and this was my host family. And Miyoko, who is the mother on the far right, she was a marvelous host. She spoke a lot more English than I spoke Japanese, and she was just such a wonderful person. And she wanted to make sure that my stay with them was comfortable. So she said, Paul-san, I see that on your profile it says you like sushi. Is sushi? I said, oh, and I wanted to be the American that would always leave a good impression with people, not be the quote ugly American. So I said, Miyoko, I love sushi. She goes, fantastic, we'll have sushi later today. And so after I stowed all my gear and I was like really excited to have my first authentic sushi. We sat down at a table and she came out of the kitchen holding this tray and she took the cover off. And my face must have turned white because I didn't see a single California roll on there. I was like, what's that? I don't think I've seen that one before. And she was excited, so I just kind of had to like fake it. And I was like, what have I gotten myself into? This doesn't look like the tame variety of American sushi that I'm used to. I'm thinking, boy, I don't want to say no, that's not what I meant. So I just had this epiphany. I said, you know what? I said, with enough soy sauce, you can kill the taste of almost anything. Just go for it, Paul. And I did. So I was like, and you know what? To this day, it was probably the best sushi that I've ever had. It was so artistically created. And at one point, she leaned over to her husband, Jun, and I heard him whispering something in her ear. And I was afraid I had broken some rule of Japanese etiquette. And I said, Miyoko, is everything okay? Have I done something inappropriate? She goes, oh, no, Paul-san, you're fine. She goes, my husband, he know you like sushi. He just didn't know you like so much of it. And what I didn't realize was that I had brought my North American appetite to something that was, to a culture that didn't quite overeat like I was used to at that point initially. But anyway, so how many of you have also found yourselves in similarly uncomfortable positions and you're like, what do I do? Go for it. Go for it. Because we actually grow every day by these rich experiences. But here's what you have to know about your willingness to do that first. I'd like everybody to stand up. We're going to do a little experiment. So what I'm going to have you do very quickly is I'd like you to just kind of bring your arms up and fold them in front of you. And I'd like you to pay attention to which arm is on top, left arm or right arm. And now some of you actually started to go one way, so well, that's not the way I do it, go back. So just to make sure you did it correctly, put your arms back down and bring them up again quickly and fold them. Same arm on top, isn't it? Okay. Now I'd like you, who did it differently? You go stand out in the hallway. No, I'm just kidding. Now, for the rest of you, though, actually try to switch your arms so the other one's on top. Help the person next to you if they can't figure this out. Now, in most cases, your brain is telling you what right now? This isn't right. And it's actually giving you corrective feedback to do what? Yeah, there we go. That's much better. Now, according to the researchers at McKinsey, those of you with your right arm on top tend to excel in the romance department. In the romance department. No switching arms. See, all the single people are like, yeah, check this out. Right arm on top here. Okay. Now, yes.
We need to clarify our natural way of holding our arms or the one that you just made.
The natural way, yeah. Now, there's a part two to this, so put your arms back down. This time what I'd like you to do is bring your hands up and clasp your fingers together and look at which thumb is on top, okay? And there's a natural way of doing that, too, just to make sure, switch it the other way and see what happens. How does that feel? Just plain wrong, doesn't it? So that's much, much better. Now, go back to the right way. And according to the folks at McKinsey, those of you with your left thumbs on top, highly intelligent. Very, very analytical. Sometimes accused of being a little bit skeptical, maybe, but generally very intelligent. While those of you with your right thumbs on top are highly intuitive, very empathetic, able to dial in on other people's emotions very easily, and also tend to be more gullible. In fact, it's those of you with the right thumb on top that actually believed the whole bit about the right arm on top also. All right, please sit down. The point of this was not about left arm, right arm at all. The point of this exercise was about the signals that our bodies give us when we're doing something that is either natural or not natural. The people that we hang out with and tend to associate with today, that's a pattern that's stored in our brain. Those patterns that we use over and over again, they become what we call myelinated. Has anybody heard of that term before? It means myelinated synaptic pathways. And it's actually a coating of protein and fat that actually makes it much more energy efficient to keep doing the same thing over and over again, like crossing my arms a certain way. And when we go to a less efficient way, like switching my arms, the brain says, hey, why are you doing that? That's more work. Go back to the other way. So what we want to do is, and it's important to note that in this particular case, the brain is not so much like a computer as it is a muscle. Because the more we exercise a muscle, the stronger it gets, right? Same thing. If I was a computer, how many times would I have to write new software to get the computer to respond differently? Once, right? But that's not what the brain does. You can do the new code once, and you're still going to go back to the old way because that's what feels natural. So it's more like muscle memory. So what we need to know is that changing behavior, becoming more respectful with our interactions, takes practice. And some of the things that you're going to want to do, you're going to have to do while they feel unnatural and uncomfortable because they're not like you today, but they become natural. The more we do them, it's like laying down new asphalt on a highway. The more you do it, the more comfortable you become doing it in the future. So that's one of the things. So there's a couple of things we can do to make it easier longer term to do this. We can get in the habit of doing something new every week. Trying a new place for lunch, driving a new way to work, whatever it is, but it's just something to kind of get us out of our comfort zones. We can do discovering new ways to play. How many of you like theater? How many people in here like theater? Okay, so for those of you who like theater, I want you to try monster trucks before the end of summer. It doesn't have to become your new favorite, but what it does is it gives you, and try not to judge other people when you're there. Simply develop an appreciation for how other people have fun and enjoy themselves. And it's a great exercise in flexibility. Visiting new places, there is intentionally making new acquaintances and participating in groups that you don't naturally affiliate with. And there's even the subtle practice of listening to people who have viewpoints different than yours and intentionally not trying to change their mind. Your job is just, even though you want to so badly explain why your way of looking at it is right and theirs is wrong, refrain from that and just make it your job to listen and learn. These small things that we do, they really do have the opportunity to make us much, much better at how we interact around others. Rule number 8, learn to be wrong on occasion. How many of you, this even makes you shudder just thinking about having wrong? What? How many of you are married or formerly married to that person who always had to be right? How many of you are that person who always has to be right? Thank you. Thank you. Well, here's interesting. Just ponder this, because this, I believe, is one of the greatest triggers for treating other people with disrespect. Because when we think that we're right about something, doggone it, we just know it, right? Well, according to my friend Dr. Robert Burton, he has a book, I love the title, On Being Certain, Believing You Are Right Even When You're Not. In most cases, when we know we're right about something, we believe that our position is anchored in intellect and fact and rationale. It almost never is. It's usually anchored in solid, good old-fashioned emotion. We just don't want to be wrong. How many of you have ever staked out a position with an argument, and even when the evidence started to mount that you might not be right, you refused to leave your position, and you rode that horse until it was dead on the ground, and you still didn't want to dismount even then, right? And it's because it's emotion. And if we can learn to recognize those things and actually step away from it, it actually inhibits and prevents us from, in some cases, justifying why we can treat other people with disrespect because they're wrong and we're right. And when we accidentally cross that line, this should be followed with rule number 9, which is never hesitate to say, I'm sorry. And this is a huge one, especially for leaders. If I'm a leader or supervisor and I come to find that I've treated someone in a way that they perceived as disrespectful, and I apologize, and I say, you know what, I think that didn't come out the way it should have, and I need to apologize for that because of whatever. Does that make me a weaker or stronger leader? Way stronger. Way stronger, because it demonstrates humility, it demonstrates an ability to learn and to move forward and to treat my people truly with dignity and the respect that they deserve. So the other thing, remember how we said that if I damage or injure somebody, that goes immediately to long-term storage? What happens, though, if I apologize immediately afterwards? It doesn't mean it never happened, but it puts a bookend after it. It allows us to move forward so that the next time they see me, that's not the first thing that's coming to mind for them. We've provided closure and made up for that event. Now, as long as I'm not doing the same thing every day or over and over again, then that actually allows us to move forward much more readily. Number 10, intentionally engage others in ways that build their self-esteem. We talked about this already, but I want to share this with you. This means ourself too. Your capacity for treating other people with respect to a degree depends on how well you can do it for yourself. Now, we have a whole nother course in that, so I'm not going to belabor this, but I'll simply say that understanding what healthy self-esteem is, it's the degree that you like and respect yourself and you feel confident to deal with whatever the day has in front of you. If I can cultivate that in myself, I have far greater bandwidth to extend it to other people as well. Love myself unconditionally. I have a friend of mine who passed away a number of years ago. His name was Bob Mowat, and he, even though I'm not a particularly religious person, he used to use this analogy. He would say, in the Bible it says, love thy neighbor as thyself, which is, as he would say, that's the problem with the world today, as so many people do. If I'm beating myself up, I'm much more prone to beat other people up also. So rule number 11, make sure that I'm respectful of time. If I'm in an 8-person meeting, but I'm always doing 90% of the talking, do you think that could be maybe perceived as being disrespectful? Making time to hear other people's contributions is very important. And finally, what I saw everybody else doing earlier is smile. Develop the habit of intentionally cultivating a smile, especially when you're in the presence of other people. I find that there's a lot of people who think they're smiling, but nobody else knows it. When they're given feedback for the first time that they're not perceived as being friendly, they're like, I don't understand it. How could that be? Why do people think I'm not smiling? And it really is. So you almost have to make yourself open to feedback to see how people perceive you. But what is a smile when somebody approaches you, not a salesperson, you're walking into Best Buy or something, but when somebody approaches you and they come into your office and you turn around and you're smiling, what does that tell them? You're approachable. They're safe in your presence. And this is not exclusively, but this is almost true across the vast majority of cultures in the world right now, is that when people are genuinely, that when they feel safe around you, you're going to be much more approachable. So let me just wrap up with just very quickly with a couple closing thoughts. First of all, how many of you like inspirational quotes? I'm a quotation junkie. If you like quotes and you like new quotes, if you go to our website, legacycultures.com, you can actually sign up for something called the Coffee and Keynote Service. And every Monday through Friday at about 7:30 a.m., we fire off a little inspirational quote just to get your day started off on the right foot. We'll typically rotate between the themes of respect, leadership, personal development, and teamwork. So every week we'll have like 5 quotes in a row in alignment with those different themes. Just something that we do for free to kind of keep people stepping lightly in their shoes. What I would like to do is have you ask yourself a question going forward. One way or another, you're going to create a legacy with the people around you. It can happen unintentionally or it can happen intentionally. And that legacy is basically going to be a memory of not what you did, but how people felt when they were around you. When someone that you haven't seen in 2 months, they're coming through they see you in the parking lot or walking down a hallway, the very first thing that comes to mind for you and for me is how we felt in the presence of that other person. And so the question I would ask you is, what do you want that memory of you in the minds of other people to be? Do you want them to immediately open up and smile and approach, and in some cases I see people here hugging that they haven't seen each other in a while, or do you want them to see you and immediately do this and kind of go in a different direction? Because one interaction at a time is how we build that legacy. So I'm going to suggest that we do it intentionally and not accidentally. The anthropologist, the American anthropologist Margaret Mead, she said, never doubt that a small committed group of citizens, thoughtful citizens, can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So just this small group of people in here today, if you and nobody else ever did anything differently, but you started to walk out of here with the intention of treating people in a way that made them feel respected and valued and appreciated, and you did it consistently, do you think that in its own way would make a difference within P&G? Undoubtedly. So never doubt that power that you have. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I hope you picked up something helpful. Okay. I know it's just a little bit past 3:30. Any questions that I can, we had a couple questions this morning, but any questions we could talk about a little bit?
The sharing exercise that we do
Yeah.
for other companies, what do you do when folks just are really private?
Yeah. You honor that. You honor that. We can't force people to make themselves vulnerable. What we can do is let them see us being that, and because what most people like to be around other people who are happy, and if they start to associate that kind of sharing with being happy and trusting around other people, at some point, most will let their guard down a little bit, but we don't want to force it, especially if we're not in the habit of doing that right now, because then their first impression might very well be suspicion. Why do you want to know this, right? So you got to take that into consideration.
I think it goes back to how they feel. You at least let them know, like, well, when you're ready to share, I'm here for you, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, something like that. I think that still brings the
Or if you,
like you're approachable,
yeah.
even though I'm not telling you anything that you want to
Yeah.
hear. But at least I know that I can.
Right. At least, yeah, let's say if you ever feel like talking, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Great question. Any others? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the week.